Chapter 7 Strategies of Good and Evil. Thursday, 10 a.m. The Gatehouse of Sight.
Grace, some information which Head Inspector Cautious shared with me before he left is very disconcerting. There are characters of whom he and I are highly suspicious. Characters who, according to him, sneak about this castle at odd hours of the night, meet others in secret shadows, and purposely avoid detection.
Who was it that he saw sneaking around?
Well, Grace, that is just what I asked him. He said his eyesight was not what it had been, so he was not able to identify who the characters were, nor have their nightly exercises been on a frequent enough basis. He went on to say that they will get the boot when he finds out who they are.
How was it that they did not see him?
Well, from what I know, he would often spend a lot of time in the towers watching what was going on at night in the castle, as opposed to the inspectors who were keeping watch outside the castle. He also said that whoever was or is sneaking around would wait a while before venturing out, but they probably could not see him in the shadows. For myself, I do not blame him for being suspicious. Any discerning head inspector could not afford to treat these incidents, and this attack as a coincidence. We can't expect our nerves to be unaffected during a crisis like this. However, we can have peace of mind knowing that we are doing our duty in keeping the castle guarded. But even more so from the promises in the plaques.
You are right, Perceive. We especially need to remember the promises.
Thursday, 10 a.m. In the main courtyard next to the Tower of Hearing.
I guess we're the first ones back. We'd not find any cracks, Inspector Candid.
Yes, young aspirer. You do not need to remind me. Once everyone gets back here, hopefully we can make a real choice about what to do next,
He replied, rubbing his hands together and eyeing Resident Aspire.
You mean about the invading army group outside this castle?
Aspire, I have been meaning to get around to this for some time, but you being in the vocal minority who believe that the force outside is an army and not the harmless group that most of us see, tells me that you need a lecture. It seems that you have opinions that are not in keeping with the majority in this castle. Hanging around with the head inspector and residents who believe in the king is fine, perhaps even beneficial for a youngster with no experience, as long as you don't take them seriously on their views of the king. You must have noticed by now that only a few residents in this castle share their views.
I have noticed that, Inspector Candid.
Well, if you decide to play follow the leader in respect of the sentiments of the head inspector regarding the king, then you should not be surprised if the majority in this castle differs with you. And yet, you walk around with the air of someone who believes they will be spared unpleasantness, because they keep all their obvious opinions to themselves.
Is my inclination to avoid unpleasantness really obvious, Inspector Candid?
Yes, it is, and so are your sentiments regarding the king. Whether you wish to avoid unpleasantness or not, it will usually come knocking at your door sooner or later. My advice to you is to try to think about how you might deal with it when it does come. Do not expect to be happy when the majority disagrees with you. This world has no regard for bystanders.
Oh, I see. That is good advice, Inspector Candid. I can see how that would help.
Most correct, Candid, and very concise,
Replied Resident Resolve, who was walking up with a dubious expression.
Well, Resolve, it's a good thing you make noise when you walk,
Resident Candid replied.
If you do not mind, Candid, I need to borrow Resident Aspire here for a while.
Yes, I am done administering some much-needed lecturing, so that is fine.
A few minutes later, up on the walls of Finite Castle, and looking in the direction of Victor Castle, Resident Resolve and Aspire spoke of the conflict that engulfed Finite Castle.
I see what you see, Inspector Resolve. An army, a well-prepared one. Inspector Resolve, I don't want to be under the rule of the enemy. Must this castle be defeated because some would rather trust the wall than the king? I'm sure you have seen the cracks as I have. The walls will not last. I'm worried. Not only that, But how can we get the other residents to see that there is an army down there and not a retinue of entertainment?
I'm not sure how we can get them to see what we see. I would be concerned if you were not worried. We do need a wall, but the king did not intend our wall to save us. Perhaps, if we study the plaques more deeply, we may discover how to get other residents to see what you and I see, and then we can begin to do something about it. The wall, though useful in many ways, cannot save us if we trust in it alone. The king can save us, and that is where we need to shift the focus, both in life and in this present struggle against the army outside Finite Castle. Your help will be needed.
What can I do to help Inspector Resolve?
Our choice is a weapon against Pernicious, and our desire to trust the king due to the plaques is ammunition against his lies.
After a moment of silence, he went on.
I have been an inspector long enough to recognize his philosophies, lies and weirs, and they are opposite to the weirs of wisdom, discernment, and peace which you and I read about in the plaques. Head Inspector Cautious is on the same page that you and I are on regarding the king.
I don't know what to do, Inspector Resolve.
Do not keep silent. Be cautious and tactful. I know that you have a sharp mind, yet you also have an inclination to be shy and reserved. I need to be backed up once in a while. The fact that Head Inspector Cautious trusted you is enough for you to make suggestions if you think they will help.
I'll try to help you, Inspector Resolve.
I believe that the strangers in white will help us during the confrontation that is surely coming, and we are going to need it. I should add that what Resident Candid said about not expecting to be happy when the majority disagrees with you is not entirely accurate. If the majority disagrees with you in regard to what you know is right, because it comes from the plaques, line upon line, precept upon precept, here a little, there a little, be happy to know that you are doing what is right regardless of what you may suffer or how many are opposing you.
Whatever might happen, you and I will support the king.
Yes, we will aspire. And therein is true liberty. Being a resident now, your support can help those of us who are outnumbered in our position regarding the king. We will head to the courtyard square soon, but I wanted to tell you that as introverted as you may feel, your influence will still make a difference for the better in this castle's policies regarding the king.
Thursday, 10:30 a.m. at the Marble Square. All of the residents were gathered in the Marble Square except for the ones who were on guard duty. As residents Resolve and Aspire arrived, someone was asking a question.
It has been some time, but why is it that we don't know who the acting head inspector is? Don't be bashful, Rye,
said Resident Adroit.
Yeah, why are you keeping us in suspense?
Because of us, replied Resident Rye. I am not the acting head inspector, and neither is Resident Candid. After this was said, everyone except Resident Grace, who was playing with her hair again, looked from Resident Rye to acting head inspector Perceive. I may not agree with everything Head Inspector Cautious does, but we should respect his choice completely, and you should too, Resident Rye replied, looking disappointed. At this, Resident Candid looked a little dejected, while Resident Resolve brightened up a little. His non-verbal response was not lost on Resident Adroit.
What are you so relieved about? I hope you haven't forgotten that you were still outnumbered regarding your positions on the king.
How could I forget?
Resident Resolve replied.
Perhaps finding a solution to our present problem may be the best move.
What is this? Resident Rye replied, looking at Resident Aspire. Before Resident Rye could say more, Resident Resolve spoke up.
I had always thought that news traveled faster than this. Perhaps some of you are unaware that Resident Aspire recently made a trip to Victor Castle and back on orders from Head Inspector Cautious.
Oh, I was unaware of that. So I guess we need to treat him like a resident then.
Resident Candid replied with grim reluctance.
Well, since he has 2 ears and 1 mouth, perhaps he will listen to the counsel of others before offering any advice. Well said, Resident Rye,
replied Resident Adroit.
Well, you both have a point,
replied Resident Resolve with an air of annoyance.
Yet, Resident Aspire is correct in that we do need to decide what to do about our present situation.
Since Head Inspector Cautious has made Aspire a full resident, his opinion does count.
Acting Head Inspector Perceive replied.
Now, what are we going to do about our present situation?
Thursday, 7 p.m. The forest. Although the sun had just set beyond the horizon, a little light could be seen in the western sky. The twilight had become mostly faint reddish-orange tints and lines on the edge of clouds, which were slowly sinking into the obscurity of night. The work of destruction went on. Colonel Devious had stationed his tent a distance away from Finite Castle so that he could observe as much of the attack as he could from one place. On the table before him was a diagram of the walls of Finite Castle. On it, he had jotted down here and there where his troops were going to attack, and what gates he would cluster with battering rams. Various notes were also scrolled on the sides concerning the recent developments in the siege. A sentry cleared his throat.
What is it?
Colonel Devious asked.
There's a report here for you, sir.
Oh, admit him.
Hello, Design. Our attack is going on 12 hours now.
You have done a decent job of keeping tabs on the Gate of Hearing and hitting the attack there. I assume you have something to report.
I thought you would like to know that there is a crack in the wall, and perhaps we could even out the battering rams and put some heavier ones near the wall of the Gate of Hearing.
I have some interesting new developments connected with that, Lieutenant. You remember that, Head Inspector?
Oh, yes, the thorn in our side.
You will be happy to know that Caution is no longer around. It seems that he slipped out of the castle in the opposite gate from the one we are attacking. Where he went, we do not know for sure. Perhaps to Fein Castle. Yet during this attack, since he is gone, his rank and influence will not work against us.
Oh, that's great news. You're speaking of Cautious. That is one less resident partial to the enemy.
Yes, one of my sentries nestled in a tree top saw him exit the castle from the gate of side about 10 minutes before we attack. A resident who distrusts the enemy, Rai by name, has the most seniority, and it is he who is probably the acting head inspector. This development will ease our subversion of this castle.
Yes, Colonel. And as to subversion, I plan to speak to this castle again in a few minutes.
Yes, relentless persistence. We may not know what is going on inside that castle, but for all we know, they might almost be ready to cave in and welcome us as Asunder Castle did. Whatever the case, we must outlast them with greedy determination. How many speeches have you given them?
Well, Colonel, several so far. The ones up on the wall have gawked down at me like dazed dopes during my speeches. And other than arguing amongst themselves, that is all they have done. Like Asunder Castle, and unlike Fein Castle. I am sure there is a hunger in Finite Castle, not satisfied with bread and butter, but by what we have. Even if they do not give in, it is pleasurable to see from the outside the longing in their eyes for what their so-called principles are denying them.
Yet, if they keep looking and longing, it is good for us.
Yes, Colonel. And who is to say that my speeches will not work in concert with their desires to give in?
Sooner or later, they may wear down and give in. Continual temptation that they will not firmly resist has that effect, although it is annoying when the enemy does give them power to resist.
I guess the antidote for that is to be industrious.
Yes, Lieutenant, and persevering in our attack.
When the lieutenant left, the colonel went back to his diagram and studied it diligently. Thursday, 7:15 p.m. The Gatehouse of Hearing. Why do you resist us? There is no danger of our hurting you. Take a look at what you see out here. Amusing entertainment as well as good food and pleasant company. Think about the enjoyment and the ease you can expect from the jolly group out here. Why do you keep your gates closed? We are a harmless and kind group of people wanting to share our talents for the comfort and ease of those inside. I leave it to your wise auspices auspices to give us and our amusements a hearty welcome. I think that is what I heard the mustachioed guy with the cane say, and I believe I am repeating it almost word for word, Resident Leary said, pointing down outside the castle. I would say that was word for word, Leary. Those entertainers down there are so interesting to watch. It is hard to resist a group with such goodwill and delectable goodies. All that bread in those baskets sure do look good. I would agree with you, Presume. It's hard to stand here watching and not be able to partake of anything or enjoy it. I really like the harps and some of the costumes.
But about that speech, Larry repeated, word for word.
Resident Resolve replied with his arms crossed.
I believe you when you say it's what you heard, but that is not what I heard. And though you may still see a cane which that guy with the mustache is tapping on our gate, I see a battering ram. And what I heard him say was something different also. I don't see any goodies down there, delectable or otherwise. I do not see harps or costumes. I do see crossbows and uniforms.
Later on, Leary would remember what Resident Resolve said he had heard from the guy with the cane, who was directing the battering ram down on the ground. Why do you think you can resist us? There is danger if you resist of our hurting you. Take a look out here. Wall-bruising equipment, bad moods, and foul company if you do not surrender soon. Think about the deployment of arms you can expect from this army out here. If you want us to treat you in a harmless way, then let us in before we waste more energy. I leave it to your fears to decide the manner of your welcome. Well, if what you heard was true, I can understand your concern, Resolve. Presume mused. Yes, and if what you hear and see is true, then that guy down there has a lot of nerve. Resident Leary agreed with Resident Presume. Well, I'm going back to the Marble Square. See you later, Presume. The enemy of souls had put most of his siege engines near the Gate of Hearing. The catapults were launching stone after stone into the castle walls, which were holding but would not hold forever.
It is a sight to make one sick, Resident Larry, even though you cannot see it or hear the impact of the catapults on the wall.
Resident Resolve said in disgust as he peered down at the enemy, as his implements of war were at work and battering the wall.
It was inevitable, Larry. This attack was inevitable.
So if what you see down there is true, then why does pernicious accuser seek our ruin with such hate and cruelty?
We were created in the image of Creator King. For one and for another, the plaques say in so many words that he derives pleasure by making castles who are the subjects of Creator King miserable. His object is not so much us, though he delights in tormenting us. His true goal is to bring as much pain to the hearts of King Sovereign and Creator King as possible.
This is in the plaques,
That is correct, Larry.
Okay, Resolve, you don't need to tell others that I asked you this question, but if the plaques are so wonderful, why are some of them so hard to understand?
Is there any specific section you had in mind?
Well, for example, how about the plaques that we have from the last book? That section is crazy with all the symbols and beasts and times, and I cannot make heads or tails of it.
Well, Larry, the key to understanding the last book in the plaques is to study book 2, 3, 4, and 5 in the ancient section. If you do, you encounter many references to a traveling holy tent-like structure. If you study that tent, its functions and its purpose, it will help unlock for you the meaning of much of the last book in the plaques.
Really? I did not know that. So, can you tell me what you see down there, Resolve?
Well, there are some catapults not too far from the castle, and of course several battering rams pounding on the walls. You hear a tap-tap supposedly from a cane, but I hear battering rams.
What do they look like, Resolve?
Well, for one, there appears to be something written on the side of them, Larry.
Oh, what does it say?
It says, Siege Engine of Lust. So lust must be the primary weapon in this attack of temptation. That catapult over there says the same thing on the side of it. So does that one. They are all weapons on lust. Yes, they all have the same words on them. According to an earlier conversation I had with Resident Aspire, the weapons which the enemy used on Victor Castle were the siege engines of pride. Well, Larry, I should probably head to the Marble Square soon. I have a feeling that there's going to be some conflict here.
Okay, Resolve. Let me know what the consensus is once you know.
Okay, I will do that. Talk to you later.
Thursday, 7:30 p.m. The courtyard. The moon was beginning to rise in the night sky, and the mood in the castle was tense. The regular pounding could still be heard within the castle. To some, it still sounded like a cane knocking on the walls, and to others, it sounded like a battering ram. In a secret meeting, Artifice was speaking with Ploy and Guys in the shadow of a tower, where a tower and a wall came together.
It is unfortunate and probably unknown to the Colonel that Perceive is now the head inspector instead of Rye. No doubt he believes Rye to be the head inspector. At the moment, there is nothing we can do about it except proceed with our normal mode of operation in sabotaging the defenses of this castle. The wares, philosophies, and commodities from Osanda should have diverted the wares of wisdom from doing so much damage.
Well, Artifice, it has been difficult to check the flow of wares of wisdom since Cautious sent petitions for it on a daily basis.
Yes, well, this is one of those instances where enough of the right information was not fed to the Colonel. Other than some errors in judgment, I know your efforts here have been sincere. To remain unmasked in a castle such as this is no easy task. Although it will be easier now than before, since a major thorn in our side is gone.
But when Cautious does something, he does not tell us. It is almost like he suspected us, but how could he? We did not know he was leaving, although it was not too soon in my opinion,
replied Guys, shaking his head and glancing directly at Artifice as he fidgeted. Yes, replied Ploy. Cautious leaving when he did was good timing for us.
His experience and devotion to the enemy would have been a big drawback for us, but at least without Cautious, Aspire will be easy to control,
Guys replied.
Because of his age, he does not seem to pose a threat, but his opinions mirror those of Cautious. We should be careful. I know that Resolve is encouraging him to speak up, and if it came down to a vote, he is a full resident now and would vote against us for sure. Perceive and Resolve both have a lot to do, and so they have less attention to give to other matters, and this is the way it should be. Such is not so with Aspire. We have to watch these residents. If we are not careful or diligent, they may rediscover the secrets which could doom us. As you well know by now, Finite Castle possesses plaques.
I have heard residents speak of them before, replied Ploy. But until confirmation by Guys here yesterday, I was not exactly sure what they referred to.
Yes, this, guys, is why rumors and taboo do not phase Aspire, and is also responsible for the spirits of opposition we face in Perceive, Resolve, Cautious, Grace, and perhaps Hope. I believe that these five study them often.
Artifice replied.
We must be ready in case someone makes a connection between the wall and the plaques, and those impressions on the top of the wall.
If they make a connection between the plaques and the impressions on the wall, then it will be very likely that all the residents will see the same thing outside the castle walls. And we know what that means. And that is not bad news compared to what they may see on the inside of the castle, Ploy observed.
Yes, and the only result of that will be an invasion army from the enemy, and our time in this castle will most likely be up.
Guys replied, still fidgeting.
So, it is vital we keep all residents distracted as much as possible, especially ones who love the enemy. That way, they will not have the time to think of anything besides survival. If we find that someone does discover the connection between the wall and the plaques, we must intervene.
Artifice, we have our swords with us, hidden as always. If they discover the connection between the wall and the plaques, then before they tell the other residents, we can waylay them and, then persuade them with the flat of our swords to hole up in some quiet place until the attack succeeds.
Yes, well, not informing the Colonel that Aspire had visited Fane Castle was a dangerous slip-up and a foolish mistake. May I ask how such a blunder occurred?
Well, began Ploy disconcertedly. As to Aspire, we knew about him before his trip, but his trip was something that took place on the spur of the moment. He was clearly treated by all the residents as a junior resident, and there was no indication that Cautious was going to make him a resident by sending him to another castle.
Aspire was and is shy, reserved, and looks nowhere near his age,
Guys remarked.
As to him leaving, Ploy began, he must have received his orders from Cautious inside the Great Tower and left early in the morning or late at night because none of us saw him leave. As is the normal custom in castles, he did not become a resident until after his first trek to another castle, and we did not know he was going on a trip there in the first place. As we all know, only residents can enter the Great Tower with the ability to bring back information, direct information, that is. So there was no way for us to know he was going anywhere.
Well,
Artifice began sternly.
allow me to remind you that before I left, I was the regent of pitiful Asanda Castle, which, as you know, is well under the control of Radiance. When I was a spy there, no one escaped my casual scrutiny. Asanda Castle was not attacked so much because it was a threat, although with Fane Castle's frequent and annoying petitions, that was a possibility. But because it seemed a marvelous prospect as a distribution center for our philosophies, wares, and ideas.
Yes, we have noticed the effect of those wares even here in Finite Castle. And Artifice, it does make our mission easier.
That is the idea. To some inside, it did not seem like an attack. Of course, that was what we told them. Only Resident Sharp saw an army, and the rest of the residents thought he was crazy. The rest of the residents saw what most of the residents in this castle see outside, a ragtag group of jolly musicians, bakers, clowns, and actors. In the end, with the help of a baker, we easily convinced them that they were being introduced to a life of interest, ease, and amusement. That one resident who saw an army, Resident Sharp by name, told the other residents it was an attack, but it turned into a welcoming ceremony. Except during my errands to report to Radiance the day after the attack, not even junior residents escaped careful observation. By the time of the attack, we knew almost everything about every resident in that castle. We knew what they liked to eat, where they slept, and what they did when they thought no one was looking. Although your efforts have been admirable, you have overlooked some vital rules of sabotaging and spying on a castle.
After a bit of silence, Artifice went on.
Because you have failed in this and have delivered incomplete information, this attack is going to be more difficult than ever. It does not say much about you when a common resident can disappear for 3 days and you don't notice it. I have learned by concealment and observation that some of you have actually been spotted by Cautious at night on errands about the castle. Even if this attack does not fail, some serious training is called for.
Well, if it comes down to it, I would not mind shadowing Aspire, since he has time and might make a connection between the plaques and the wall,
replied Ploy.
That is something that needs to be done, but there are some other things to get over first. Let's not forget that the priority is distracting them from calling on the king while also tempting them to put trust in their walls and efforts. I don't think these residents will open the castle gates to our allies outside, because whereas only one resident in Asanda Castle saw an invading army, there are at least 4 in this castle who do. As to our next step, guys, you should go to the courtyard square to covertly argue against the king. I will be about the castle, observing and helping where and when I can.
So for the time being, Artifice, I will be in the main square ready to take on Resolve and other dissenters,
said Guys.
Yes, and I will be shadowing Aspire,
Ploy replied.
Now about Aspire. One of us should find Perceive for the purpose of distracting Aspire with castle duties. There is something else. Have you thought about when you're going to use the weapon of guilt? Do you realize you need to use it a while after the attack has commenced, and carefully so it does not look like you have double standards? On the one hand, you would be against calling on the king, and on the other, making them feel guilty for not calling on the king up to that point. It is a matter that requires delicate skill.
I was thinking of that, Artifice, and it should occur when the walls have become noticeably weaker, but that has not really happened yet. Also, some of the more annoying residents may not take the bait.
True, but you need to try it anyways. Carefully, that is, and at the right time. And when... Wait. Someone is coming in our direction. Off to your posts. Good luck.
Heading off in different directions in the dark, the spies then went to their posts to carry out their assignments. Just after they broke up, it began to rain, and cold air settled in and around the castle. Passing by the corner about a minute later, Resident Aspire glanced at the corner where the spies had been. After pausing for a few seconds, he then walked off, pulling his cloak closer to him to thwart the pelting rain. As he did, a shadow stepped out of a doorway and began quietly and carefully trailing him from a distance. Thursday, 7:45 p.m., the Courtyard Square. The night air gently rushed through the large tree near the fountain while rain splattered on the cement fountain bench. The boom-boom of the battering rams continued to pound the walls. A planned meeting was taking place amongst the three emissaries.
Our meeting here is necessary in regards to the events of the past 24 hours,
Alien Zeal said as the three aliens ambled closer to the fountain.
I don't think I need to tell you how beneficial it is to us that Perceive was made the acting head inspector over Resident Rye,
replied Alien Bold.
Well,
Began Alien Zeal.
what will be our line of attack? Where will we go from here?
He asked.
It occurs to me,
Alien Bold observed.
while most of the residents in this castle do not trust the king, it is also true that Finite Castle does not lack in brains. Leary, for example, does not seem to favor the king, but he is quite intelligent, and he is also friends with Perceive and Resolve, who do favor the king. Despite his sentiments, I think he is intelligent enough to know that the walls alone may not save them from the enemy. His hope that they won't fall is probably what's keeping him from siding with Resolve on this issue during the attack. Cautious was clever to put them working on the same projects.
Alien Bold finished, folding his arms and tapping his chin.
If Larry could be shown that his liberty is in jeopardy, he'd be intelligent enough that perhaps he would see his sense in calling on the king rather than trusting in a failing wall. During an intense attack, his desire for liberty might overrun his misgivings regarding the king.
Yes, Constant, he is smart enough to see the two options: subjection to the fallen pernicious or a rescue on the part of the king. And with the correct approach or logic, he might be persuaded to choose the path of liberty and trust. It is clear that Resolve is trying to use logic to persuade Leary and the others in this respect, and we can help.
You're right, Bold. Let us make sure that one of us is on hand to help Resolve out in the Courtyard Square. One of us should also guard Aspire. As I came here, I noticed that Aspire was being followed by one of the spies. Why, I'm not sure, but one of us should stick around to protect him and give him a boost, as he could be a help to others in this conflict. He's very shy, and this could detract him from being a contribution to our cause and the preservation of Finite Castle.
Well, I will guard him and give him some moral support,
Replied Alien Zeal.
Since Cautious began treating him as a full resident, he seems to be coming out of his shell.
I think that is a good idea, Zeal. The spies all carry swords like we do, but theirs are concealed. I do not like the fact that Aspire was being followed, for whatever reason. They might try to silence him, but if you're around, Zeal, that will not happen.
I remember that Lord Mysterious worked in Victor Castle during the attack about 3 weeks ago. Lord Mysterious does not often venture from the Great Tower, but when he does, the spies avoid him like the plague. There are some residents who caught on to that. I think Resident Ponder and Alert were some of them.
I think it is likely that Lord Mysterious will make an appearance here.
Well, I am off to find Aspire,
Replied Alien Zeal, nodding to the others in turn.
I will be in the Marble Square.
Replied Alien Constant.
It is likely that a debate will not be far from Resident Resolve.
With that, the emissaries split up in different directions, all heading to a certain place. Time unknown. The arbor in the capital city.
I believe someone is about to enter, my king.
Yes, Lord Mysterious is coming.
As Mysterious entered, Sentient bowed low.
Mysterious, you will be heading to Finite Castle? I understand you will be in their great tower shortly. It is getting to that time when your help will greatly assist them. You will be helping Resident Aspire?
Yes, I will speak to him. He will be placed on guard duty soon, a new role for him. It is a tactic of the enemy, but instead of it hurting Finite Castle, I will see to it that it is a benefit. I will go and speak to Aspire for a while. Before too long, I will exit the Great Tower and head to the wall where Aspire will be stationed. It is because of the petition of Victor Castle that I am going.
Sentient bowed again as Lord Mysterious left.
It is probably accurate that most residents in the Land of Castles do not understand the true nature of Lord Mysterious, even though he is vital to any rescue operation.
He makes it possible to convey to the heart of every castle your sentiments and desire for trust and friendship. Your sentiments mirror his also. When you consider your common goals, your desires, and your characters, you, King Sovereign and Lord Mysterious, could be considered as one entity, like ice, water, and steam.
Thursday, 8:45 p.m. The Guardhouse of Hearing.
Hello, Head Inspector.
Hello there. How are you, Averse?
Oh, I am doing well.
Resident Averse replied.
That's quite a force down there.
I did not know you saw an army versus a numerous morale squad.
How are you coping, Head Inspector? You don't look like you've gotten sleep recently.
Well, that is true, but neither have some of the other guards either.
Head Inspector Perceive replied, unhurried.
Oh, that is too bad. Did you say earlier that Resident Aspire was made a full resident by Head Inspector Cautious?
Well, yes, but if you're thinking what I am, he is a little young for that.
Well, that's true, but I was just thinking that since Head Inspector Cautious trusted him, well, in this crisis he might be a help.
Well, we are short on options, so your suggestion should be considered.
The acting head inspector replied, stroking his beard.
Oh, well, Head Inspector, please don't think that I am trying to tell you what to do.
Oh, no, Averse. Your suggestion, now that I think about it, is a good one, which I think that I will implement.
I do not know him too well, but he seems like he would make a good guard.
Yes, with him I would not have to worry about the gate he would guard. He would be diligent and observant. Thank you for your suggestion, Averse.
Oh, well, I'm happy to contribute.
Yes, well, I will have someone deliver the message to Resident Aspire. I hope you do not think I am being antisocial, but I need to monitor the enemy.
From a safe distance, Head Inspector, no doubt,
replied Resident Averse.
Certainly, Averse. Thanks again. When this is all over, I'll have more time to talk.
See you later, Head Inspector.
See you later, Averse.